Hello and welcome back to this lecture from your Social Media Marketing and Strategic Approach book. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 5, which deals with social media platforms and social networking sites. So hopefully by the time we get done with this chapter, you'll be able to describe some different types of social media platforms and what kind of networking takes place on those. We'll do a little history about social networks and then look at what are some really good benefits for marketing on social networks. We'll also explain what the current research is on doing business to business marketing and business to consumer marketing on these different platforms. And then we'll look about what's going to happen in the future, what are some new developments that are coming, and then look at best practices. So let's go ahead and get started. So we have a couple of things to talk about in terms of the different social media platforms. And so this social networking is based on networking theory. And so the networking theory, I like to think of it from an economic perspective in terms of the more people that you have in your network, the more valuable that network becomes. And so that's the reason why Facebook wants more people to join it, because the more people they have that are using it, the more valuable it is. So then they can charge more for advertising, and they can also charge people more for setting up Facebook pages that they want to do advertising on. Same thing for Google, same thing for Twitter, and same thing for any social media platform. And so just keep in mind that with this social media, that it's similar to word of mouth, and that becomes very viral. And so you're getting more people to join your networks, then again, that becomes more valuable. So the more groups that you belong to, the more valuable you become as a person that belongs to the group that's seeing that ad. And so they want to attract more and more people like you who belong to a lot of different groups in order to get that word of mouth, that viral marketing out there. And so when you're doing your research about your visitors, you want to identify those people that can help you spread your story, your brand, whatever it is that you're trying to get out. And so that identify those people that belong in different networks or a lot of different networks. And so if you're doing any kind of blogging, you would also want to try and identify those bloggers that have a large following, and that following then belongs to a lot of different groups as well. And so what you're doing is you're doing a network of networks in order to get your viral marketing or word of mouth advertising out. So just in case you didn't know, we've got different types of platforms that provide different types of tools and different ways of targeting a certain audience, if you will. So your social networking sites, Facebook is more informal, LinkedIn is more for professional. You have microblogging sites, Twitter, Tumblr. You have different publishing tools, WordPress, Blogger, different collaboration tools. You've heard of Wikipedia, and so Wikipedia allows people to collaborate by opening up the entire site so that other people can edit and make changes to whatever the content was. Now, there are some tools that also allow you to only let certain people in and to block other people, but it is a collaboration way of not having to be in the same place at the same time. So it's an asynchronous type of tool, if you will. There are moving on from here in terms of platforms, there are rating and review sites. Angie's List, I just recently signed up for something in there for some home remodeling. they capture all your information, then they try to get you onto what kind of list you want so they could target the different types of advertising that people are paying from their site to come up on your screen when you're looking at things. There's the Amazon ratings, or any kind of ratings that you will. People like an item, they tend to get similar ratings, and they may rate or show you other ads that those people who like this product also like something else. There are also photo sharing sites. Pinterest, again, you'll see that's mostly for female users. There's Instagram, there's Flickr. I recently read there's something from Google that's going to develop a product that's going to compete with Instagram. There's also video sharing sites, YouTube, Vimeo, Vidler, so on, and personal broadcasting tools such as Blog Talk Radio. So there's a wealth of information, a wealth of platforms that are out there. Again, when we were talking in the previous chapters and you're trying to identify your audience, you have to determine where is it that your audience is hanging out, which one of these platforms. Some other platforms that you may be familiar with are for virtual worlds. I've seen Second Life. It seems to have lost its popularity. World of Warcraft and Farmville. Farmville also has seemed to lose its popularity. But again, there might be an audience out there that you're trying to target, and you may have to use virtual worlds in order to do that. There's location-based services if the user has that turned on. Check-ins, Facebook Places, Foursquare, Yelp, so on. There's widgets like buttons, profile badges, those sort of things. Maybe you find an audience that collects those sort of things. There's social bookmarking and news aggregation that your audience might be at. Then examples would be Dig and Delicious. Then there's group buying audience that you may go after. Groupon, Living Social, crowd savings would be examples of those. So again, there's a huge number of platforms that are out there that you're going to need to know where is it that your audience is, what platforms do they like to use, and then how do you target them on those platforms. So a little history about these different types of platforms, or at least the older ones, how they started to become very popular in the early part of the century, in the 2000s. You had examples like Facebook and LinkedIn, either personal social or professional social. This was a time when you shared either personal information or product information, and it's still going on today. But just keep in mind that these platforms, they need to be able to make money. So what is their business model? So one business model that's used a lot is to sell advertising, or you try and get the user to upgrade from the free service to a paid service, or something like LinkedIn is using, and they call that a subscription service. So if you want the professional version of LinkedIn, you would pay for that. You would subscribe to that. And so in addition to knowing the different types of platforms, you need to know how are they making money. And so they will then put up ads that may be in contrast or conflict with whatever you're trying to sell, whether it's to promote your brand or to do some advertising. You also need to be aware of how social media sites change with different audiences and different generations. So an example would be how Instagram is used a lot by younger people, or what your book is categorized as millennials. And the group of people that come after the millennials is called Generation Z. And that if you're using social networks to appeal to the young, you need to know which one they're going to be using. If it's to business professionals and women, which ones are those using? So it might be something like LinkedIn. And so I can remember when the commercial internet was initially released so that people could use it, and typically you would just get on there and everything was in text. And so there were these groups that you could actually join, and within the groups there were discussion boards. And so that's primarily how the social network started, with these discussion boards. And so it has continued to evolve, but keep in mind that they're designed around people and not interests for these social networks. So some history about social networks. You can see that as early as 1997, there was a website called 6degrees.com, and it let people build profiles and get a list of their friends and then be able to look at the list and so on. So there were millions of people on this site, but it couldn't think of a good business model, and so 3 years later it's done, it's closed. There was another site called rise.com, and it was used to help people grow their own networks. And so the people who started this also were investors behind other sites like Friendster, Tribe.net, LinkedIn. And so you can see how they evolve from something small to something bigger, something more profitable. But then these little sites that may have started people thinking about ways to do things differently never got either enough people or enough funding. And then you have sites like MySpace, which is a classic example of how things grew very rapidly. They had huge market share, and then things just fell apart. Either competitors got them or their business model wasn't enough to sustain them. And so MySpace, people got on there, teenagers liked it a lot, but then Facebook came along, and that competed with them, and so they never really were able to recover. There may even be some still MySpace people out there. So in 2004, you have the Facebook, right? But then that wasn't a really good name, and so I believe the Zuckerberg purchased Facebook.com and changed the name in 2005, and now you see how popular it is. A lot of young college students say they don't use it, but I think they still look at it. So they're seeing the information, they just may not be using it a lot to communicate. So they're using something like Instagram to communicate more. So as Facebook continued to grow, it overtook MySpace in 2008. And then by 2011, it has 750 million active monthly users or more. And then today, you can see that when we look at social media sites, it is the largest with the number of users. So it's a very popular network. But that also depends on which country you're in, because in China they have a competing site, and Facebook isn't as popular as it is in the Western culture. So here you can see the list of different networks, platforms, if you will, and the estimated different monthly users or visitors that they have and how they're ranked and when they started. So you can see Vine is relatively new, and like I said earlier, Google Plus or Google is going to have something that's going to compete with Instagram. I would probably, if we looked at this again in 2017 numbers, we could see Instagram was moving ahead of Google Plus, and is probably somewhere third or fourth up here in this ranking. And here I went out and just did social media rankings, and I believe this is a little more current. You can see Facebook is still the most popular, and I've used this before. Then you've got Instagram, which is right here, and you got YouTube, which is second now. So if we go back to our listing from our book, let's see, I'm looking for YouTube, and they don't even have it listed. So again, they're not can be using all the different social media sites that are current today. And so like I mentioned earlier, you have different sites in different countries that might be more popular than what we have in the US or in the Western culture. So look, we have QQ, it's a leader in Japan, competes with Facebook, VK in Russia. The Brazilians have their own network and so on. So if you're going after a global audience, you need to make sure you know what the social media platform is most popular in those different cultures and different locations in the world. So this slide gives you a global perspective in terms of different places that launch different media sites in the years. So we got South Korea, Cyworld, we've got Indian social networks, and Tumblr in 2007. Just take a look at that and just say, okay, look at the different places. Have you heard of these different social media platforms before? You know, half of them I haven't seen. I've heard of them. I've not visited them. Typically when I go to another country, it's a Western type of country, and so Facebook is still the most popular. And here you can see those different monthly users from the foreign social platforms. QQ, 829 million, so very similar to Facebook at that time. So there's WeChat. I have some Asian friends that use that a lot as well. So we'll go on. All right, the next thing we want to talk about is the benefits of marketing with social networks. And so what we're seeing and what you're seeing is there's a blurring between a business life and a personal life. People are just posting everything that's going on, whether it's at work or at home. And so it's kind of hard to see what the differences might be. And so when you're doing your analysis and targeting your audience for certain areas, whether it be businesses or personal, you're going to have to filter that information out somehow. In the past, when people were posting things, it would be only celebrities and politicians that would cause news media to reach out and post things about what they said and didn't say. We see that a lot with the current president. But now, just about everything anybody posts out there becomes available, and you might see it on the nightly news or in a newspaper or some other media outlet. The key thing is that when people are posting their interests, then that gives you a way of identifying similar interests and be able to market it to them, your brand or your advertising, if you will. Some other things that help you with social media is that you're able to find people that you might want to work for you. So here you see, be able to find talent. We've talked about the brand awareness. We've talked about identifying your audience and finding new customers. You might also want to use that social media to do some market research. So research areas that weren't available to you in other types of forms. You could also do some brand intelligence. Also keep in mind that your best marketing on these social media platforms is going to come from your customers and not internal to your organization or firm. So an example is with the Coca-Cola page on Facebook. So customers are there, they're talking about your brand, they're promoting your brand. Anybody that belongs to the same network as those people will see that message, and that's how you can get your marketing out. So when you're thinking about a platform, you need to think about the characteristics of your target audience. Some examples, and these are, things that you should be asking yourself if you're going to market using social media. Is your target consumer professional, or are they stay-at-home people, or people that are going to be at home using your product? Are they social networks for these professionals? Yes, LinkedIn would be for these professionals. Otherwise, you would probably want to stay away from LinkedIn. So where do they hang out? What platforms are they on? Is your product visual? If it is, then you're going to have to use something that allows you to show your product in probably some kind of three-dimensional form, if you would. So examples are Instagram, even though it's a picture, not much of a video there. Pinterest, same thing. YouTube, you can see different aspects of whatever you want your customer to see. You need to ask yourselves another good question to ask is the consumer content oriented? So a good platform for content-oriented consumers then would be something like Facebook or some other interactive kind of network. If you're looking at blogging, then LinkedIn or Google+. If they like to collaborate, then you want a wiki of some type. If you need to do demos, then YouTube might be the answer. So you can show them exactly how something works or how they could use it. You also need to think about the capabilities of the network. And so if you look at table 5.4, it shows the capabilities of each network and what you're able to do with that. Does a certain platform allow you to create a personal page, a company page? Does it allow for groups? Does it allow for lists? Does it allow for some kind of blogging? So just keep in mind that people are there to connect with friends, not to search for new products. So they're not, if you do that, you may, and when I say do that, I mean if you put a lot of stuff out there about your marketing or product, they may be offended from that and unfriend you or unfollow you, and then you've lost that potential audience member. Right? We go back to the previous content that we've talked about. When you're posting things, they need to be engaging and valuable to that audience that's there at that site. Also, early on with social media sites, companies were worried that this would allow consumers to post too many negative comments and it would be hard to deal with them, and if you didn't deal with them right, it would just make matters worse. But that doesn't seem to be the problem anymore, and people have learned how to deal with negative comments. And so what has come about is that now those negative comments are typically all in one place, and it makes it easier for you to respond to them, and then everybody sees what the response is. So here's the table 5.4 that I was talking about previously. Again, you can see if those different social media platforms allow for these type of activities to take place, and if this is something your audience wants to do, then this again helps you identify which platform you want to be in. And I'm going to pause right here, and when we come back, we'll finish the chapter.